Hello, this is Pastor John Rounds hosting the program Endurance. I'm happy to be with you. And for the saved as well as the unsaved, I've said it so many times. I know you probably get so tired of it at times, but to just give your life to Christ, man, I don't even have the words for it. To give your life to Christ is so very important. God will begin to open these things up in our heart and life. He'll begin to hold us up. It's all has to do with our prayer life. There's entreating for others. We're entreating for not only our families, our church families. It's also a personal devotion or intention, and it's also a matter of spiritual devotion. And this one here is praying. Actually, it's how to pray. It's Ephesians chapter 6, verse 18, and Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. And I'll get right into that real quickly. And so Ephesians 6:18 says this, praying always. I love that because there's another part in 1 Corinthians where it says, if you pray, and I'll get into that part, but if praying always means on all occasions. Now, sometimes a lot of people say that doesn't mean we were praying all the time, but when you get into, when it becomes a habit of yours, when it becomes a time to prayer where you have to begin to pray. I love Ephesians 6:18. It says, praying always, meaning every opportunity I get, whether I'm walking on the street, I'm praying. Whether I'm going down to Deep Bay, I'm praying. Whether I'm coming from Deep Bay, I'm praying. Whether I go home, I'm praying. Wherever I'm praying, I'm beginning to pray. Sometimes God will bring people to my remembrance that I haven't prayed for. And I begin to pray for them that God will begin to move and minister and in their lives also. Praying always, and basically this says on all occasions. With all prayer and supplications, supplications mean those that are specifically needful. On all occasions, those are specifically are needful in the spirit in watching. I love the word watching because it means sleepless. I hate to mention this, but I love Nathan and Melanie for they had a youth conference about 2 or 3 weeks ago, and I asked them if they'd been able to stay up all night, and Melanie says I got 3 hours sleep and I'm barely able to get up in the morning, and I mentioned that it would probably take 4 days for me to get up in the morning and stuff, and so I admire that. I admire that devotion, that dedication. And boy, this is all for young people. I mean, it's all for young people and being able to get people out. And I've heard a couple, I think Peter's one, who brought out a message in the Lord, and that's getting leadership. I know Nathan was talking about being able to get leaders to come up and come out of that. And he's doing a great job in that. Melanie's doing a great job. And I don't want to delete her because simply she's sitting right next to me. So. But but anyway, they both did a great job in all of that. They're watching, being sleepless, or they're keeping awake for all of this, and being able to draw these people closer and closer to the Lord. I pray, oh God, I pray, and I can't help but to hold my emotions down. That they be mature, they be spiritual enough, to be gracious enough to know that. I think there's one. I think it's out of John where it talks about for rejoice, O young people. It might be out of one of the other gospels, but this kind of came to my remembrance. It means to be joyful. I think it's out of Proverbs. I'm sorry, out of Proverbs where it talks about the youth. And it says, be joyful, you youth. And what it refers to is you have the energy. You have the abilities to get up and get out and do all of these things. I remember as a young person that I was able to get up, go out. If it was snowing outside, I went out with my cousin and we played in the snow, and we wrestled in the snow. We tried to figure out which one had the most snow on them when we got up. But and we went swimming during the summertime. We just went swimming and did a lot of stuff. So we had all kinds of energy, and that energy flowed throughout our whole life. When we woke up, and sometimes when we went to sleep, and sometimes those sleeping hours would become like 6 or 7 hours at a time, and sometimes even lower. And we just always get up, and also with an enthusiasm, with an excitement. So be blessed, you young people out there. Be blessed that God is doing the work in your life and beginning to do many things. I was a young man. I think I was 24 at the time when I gave my life to Christ, and I'm thankful for my youth. I actually, when I first got baptized with Pastor Cockrell, I had a couple of older people. Actually, it was Sister Cockrell's brother and sister-in-law, and told me, he says, we are so thankful because you're a young man. And I never thought much about it because I looked at it as being young, but I never thought much about it. But looking at their age, they just now gave their life to Christ. They were probably in their 60s. And they gave their life to Christ. Thank God for that. Not too many older people give their life to Christ. Every once in a while you hear of one, and it's so blessed by that. Because a lot of the older people are saying that, it's like I did when I first thought about doing all of these things, reading the Bible. I thought, I gave my life to Christ, and I have all these years to be able to do this. Matter of fact, one part I thought, I'll give my life to Christ when I'm older. Oh, thank God! That term and that terminology went downhill. It went downhill fast, and thank God it did. And I gave my life to Christ when I was 24. In that. And so it was watching, it being asleep, therefore, thereunto with all perseverance, meaning that we persist in our prayer life. So very important. Remember what I said last week when I talked about, I think it's out of Ephesians 6:18, and out of the other scriptures where it says that pray always. Pray, that God will begin to open these things up in our prayer life. But persistence means I'm continuing in prayer. Doesn't mean that, I love this, it doesn't mean that I'm going out on Deep Bay and giving my life, really praying and seeking the Lord, and sometimes in my front room or whatever the case is. It means I'm being persistent in my prayer life. Being persistent. It doesn't mean I'm starting something and quitting it. It means I'm being persistent in our prayer life. I like to know the prayer life of the Apostle Paul. He prayed for all the churches. He prayed for Romans. He prayed for 1st and 2nd Corinthians. He prayed for Ephesians. He prayed for Philippians. He prayed for Colossians. He prayed for 1st and 2nd Timothy. He prayed for all of these churches. Every one of them. He said it's not unjoyful, but it's joyful. God must give him a supernatural mind to be able to bring all of these people up and be able to where he began to pray for them and to seek the Lord. Here's what I want to get into. Also, perseverance. We're persisting in our prayer life. We're being steadfast in our prayer life. We're in a habit of praying. In other words, it's not having to do it, it's wanting to do it. That's where we need to all get at, where we're wanting to pray, irregardless of how quick our life is. Sometimes my life gets pretty quick. Is even being retired. It gets really quick sometimes, and I have to get that in my heart and mind. I gotta pray. I gotta be steadfast in my prayer life. I gotta pray, and God will always give me a time to where I begin to pray. And sometimes it's in the evening. I always been one to pray in the evening and seek the Lord in the evening. Now it's in the morning. Morning, noon, and night, as David said, I pray. Daniel prayed 3 times a day. It had to be morning, noon, and night. All the issues and the problems and the things that Daniel had in his life, he was able to pray 3 times a day, able to seek the Lord, able to even pray when it was against the law not to pray, able to go through the lion's den when it was impossible to go through the. Remember, these lions, they weren't fed for a few days. They didn't have any kind of a meal for 4 days. When Daniel was thrown into the lion's den, it was. He didn't have there was no way these lions can still their mouth when they seen somebody throwing down. Matter of fact, when they threw down all of Daniel's enemies, they began to gobble him up and began to eat at him and chew on him and stuff. And that's referring to their wives and families also. And so these are the things and that's what Daniel said to Persia, I believe it was, when he said that that God could close the lion's den. As a matter of fact, I seen a picture one time, and I got to get some of these pictures, to hang in my bedroom sometimes, because that's where I do most of my studying. And where it says Daniel was laying on the rocks. And as a matter of fact, when he was laying, there was one lion that laid right next to him, and another lion that laid, I think, right next to him. And there's one at his feet, and there's one probably by his head, probably giving him a pillow, and inside being able to hold him up during that. Oh, praise the Lord for that. Praise God, what God has done. Daniel was able to see from the very beginning of, this is what we talk about revelation and wisdom, the very beginning to the very ending of the world. When you look at I love Daniel. I love to read Daniel, and it talks about that he was very very meticulous in his prayer life, very much in his devotional life. He held that. Actually, he disobeyed the king twice, maybe more. It's hard to tell because sometimes the scriptures don't bring out more, but sometimes he's able to go through all of these things. I call them Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. I don't like using that because that's kind of the Babylonian names they give them, but I like to refer to them as the Jewish names in that. And they did the same thing. Even when they put into the fiery furnace, they were able to go through that. And there was a fourth man down there, by the way, and that fourth man was Jesus Christ, and he helped them through all of this. I want to read here 1 Corinthians 14:14. For if I pray in an unknown tongue, my spirit prayeth, but my understanding is unfruitful. In other words, I don't understand what I'm praying for when it's an unknown tongue. Verse 15, 1 Corinthians 14:15 says this, what is it then? I will pray with the spirit, I will pray with the understanding also. I will sing with the spirit, and I will sing with the understanding also. We may not understand what we're speaking in tongues. We are a Pentecostal church, and we have a lot of people that speak in tongues. We have a lot of people that give interpretation of tongues. We have a lot of people that sometimes there's tongues and there's sometimes revelation and all of that. And we know it, we believe it, we understand it. God kind of reveals it to our heart and life. That's where it says we may not understand it, but God will give the revelation to somebody else. And sometimes he'll give it to you too. I've heard people speak in tongues and begin to reveal that in their hearts and in their lives. And this is where it's all at. I will pray in the Spirit. I will pray with the understanding. I will sing with the Spirit. I will sing with the understanding. God will begin to reveal these things just by praying in tongues. A lot of it saddens me to no end. It saddens me to know and to realize how quick a lot of our Pentecostal churches aren't operating in this. And I know one church is not, actually probably two churches that are not operating in this. It blows my mind Because let me tell you something, I know things, I was revealed by things, I had wisdom in things simply by praying in an unknown tongue, praying in the Spirit. Matter of fact, it came to my mind that, man, this is where God began to really reveal things in my heart and life. And the reason why I'm bringing this out now is so that you begin to pray that God will reveal it in your heart and in your life. My wife worked and she works as a police administrator in the Orville Police Department. But at first, she started out as a dispatcher. There was a dispatching going on in the Orville Police Department, and sometimes she worked at nights, and sometimes she worked at days. So each and every day, actually I was working in the warehouse, each and every day we kind of drive by each other, and I'd wave, I said, hi, and she'd wave back and hi and stuff. And so then I go home and go to bed, and she, or later on go to bed, but she would go to work, sometimes at night. So one day the Lord really impressed upon me to fast at least 3 times that particular day. This was a fast. Listen, the Lord called me to fast. Now, when you fast, sometimes it's called upon you to fast. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Begin to fast. If it's one day, or if it's maybe a quarter of a day, go ahead and fast a quarter of a day. If it's a half a day, actually the time is separated into 3 parts. There's the morning, there's the afternoon, and there's the evening. And so sometimes the Spirit will give you, or you're called to pray, and sometimes they'll tell you at least fast the morning. Don't worry about eating until the afternoon. Sometimes it's fasting morning and afternoon and not worrying about eating until the evening. But the Lord really impressed upon me to fast 3 days. And actually, this is when I first, many years ago, when I first gave my life to Christ. And I don't know what was actually, and I take that back, when I was going to the Full Gospel Country Church, and God said, I want you to fast 3 days and stuff. This was something God placed in my heart, and it was something so I don't like to call it stinking, but I refer to it so easy. It was so easy to pray and to fast during that time. I told my wife, I'm going to fast 3 days. That's morning to morning. In other words, I was going to fast all day long, and morning to morning. In the 3rd day, as I was fasting, I was working on I was working with a forklift, and I began to fast during that time, and it was a beautiful time. I fasted and prayed and fasted and sought the Lord, and God was really blessing me. I didn't know how, I didn't know why, I didn't know when, I didn't know what God was placing in my heart and life. But anyway, it was one night when my wife was working. All of a sudden, I flew up out of bed. This was something Jesus Christ did. I was totally and completely asleep. I flew up out of bed and I started speaking in tongues. I spoke in tongues for a long time. I began to speak, began to praise, began to speak in tongues again, began to praise. This is where the Pentecostal church needs to go at. Begin to praise and begin to speak again. I don't know how long it lasted, but I was thoroughly blessed by that. That was during a time that actually when I was working on my forklift, I actually stood off and I was about ready to pass out. I knew then that I didn't have enough sugar. I didn't have enough, all of these things. That was the 3rd day, by the way, and that was enough. I believe that was enough that God said, you fasted 3 days and stuff. And so in that night, God had blessed me to no end. And that's where we all need to go, to be, and to fast and no end. Always. It says always pray. That means to pray, again, with all occasion. Instead of trying to live the Christian life, we need, in all of our own wisdom and strength, to pray and ask God for wisdom and strength. We try to praise in our own understanding and our own wisdom, which don't apply much. But when we get the wisdom, the revelation, the prayer, the being in God, God beginning to reveal things in our heart and life, then we begin to have that strength And in all of our supplications, in all of our prayers and supplications, these are specific needs that we need to pray about. Just quickly going back to that, God kind of revealed to me that why I believe that He gave me the 3 days of prayer and fasting, because I believe God was calling me to speak, being able to give me a heart and a desire to study things out and begin to speak in that revelation, because it was a little time sooner that Pastor one of my pastors began to reveal in my life. He wanted me to open up the youth group. And I was in the Full Gospel Country Church, and I began to pray that. It was one day, I tell you, a lot of people said they didn't. I had in our leadership meeting, we had one person say, when was the time that you were called, that you knew that you were called? I should have spoke up at that particular time, because I knew I was called. There's no ands, ifs, and buts. No man could tell me. No one could reveal it to me. It was God who told me. God who revealed it to me. When I stood up, soon after the business meeting at the Full Gospel Country Church, it was the evening. When I stood up, I had something hit me that I never got hit before, and that was the Spirit of the Lord began to indwell in me. I remember David. David I like to study because it's from his youth to his death. And David said that when he was anointed to be king, he said he stood and everything changed. It means he was once a shepherd, though he had that shepherd spirit in him. Now he knew he's going to be the king of Israel and stuff. And so I knew then that God was going to be with me, was going to heal me, was going to, going to touch me, going to have His way into my heart and life. And so that was always, meaning on all occasion, the very supplication, the very things that we need to pray for. Perseverance, being steadfast in the Lord, having all the wisdom God has given to us, having all the strength and the understanding, praying in the Holy Spirit, letting the Spirit of God speak into our heart life, praying in the Spirit, and then having that perseverance, being steadfast in our prayer life. And that's what really gets us to going. I want to read here Philippians chapter 4, verse 6. It says, being careful. Don't be anxious. Don't be troubled by things that are coming down. Man, if there's any time believers need to be troubled, it's today. I have never seen things so evil and so wicked that are going on, not only in our country, but also in Canada, also in Europe, also in Yugoslavia is having war problems, also in all of these things that we need to really understand that that all of these things that sometimes it gives us a stress. We have a lot of believers today that are stressful, that are anxious, that are hurting, that are that maybe have pain and sufferings going on in their life. God said, don't be troubled by these things. I love what the Lord said, because God knows things from the very beginning, from the time of creation to the very ending, from the millennial reign to even beyond the eternity. I call it eternity upon eternity. He knows all that from front to back. 1,000 years with the Lord is a 1,000 years. In other words, every 1,000 years, God knows me from the very time of my birth to the very ending of my life. He knows me. He knows that God will begin to move and minister in my life. I gotta pray to that. I gotta hope and pray that God will keep me through that. And God has so blessed me through all of that, even during the difficult times, even during the hard times that I'm going through. Next week, I'm going to tell you about my where I'm at today, and through all the prayer and time, because I know we're not going to get done with this prayer time this week, and I'm so praying that God will begin to reveal this into my life. But it's being careful, don't let it worry you. These things come. It's hard to. I guarantee it's hard to. It's hard to see the wickedness that's coming. It's hard to see the people being turned off by the gospel. Listen, I'm even listening to some of the people that are preaching about young people, speaking about our youth group. We're preaching about our young people. Some people are turned off simply by the gospel. They don't want to hear it. They don't want to understand it. They don't believe it. They don't want it. They don't, none of these things. I only hope and pray that to be a man or a woman of God, be able to open these things up to these young people. Remember, there's no ending to hell. There is no ending to hell. I always tell people, once you go in, you can't come back out. And so with that, I ran out of time, and I apologize for that. So with that, I'll hold you next week, or come to you next week. So have a great, great day. This is Pastor John for Endurance. Bye now.